I'm Mike.
I'm Sam. Let's get into it.
Oh, run, move! Ah! What are those guys doing out there? They don't want to play defense. They don't want to run back. And it's just,
Welcome to episode 49 of the Mike and Sam Sports Show. It's been a little while since our last episode, but still a lot of sports news going on. Obviously, the Lakers won the NBA Finals in 6 games. LeBron got his 4th title, his 4th Finals MVP. I mean, at this point in his career, you know he's going to win a couple more titles, and that just makes the debate between him and MJ that much closer. But pretty closely after the NBA Finals ended, Pro Basketball Reference released a list that we're going to put on the screen that you guys are all looking at right now of kind of Hall of Fame odds for players in the league right now. So they have 1 to 20, and maybe we can talk about players that were snubbed from this list or should be added. So without further ado, let's get right into the list. Number 1, no shock, LeBron James, 100%. I mean, I don't think his Hall of Fame kind of resume is in question. I think it's more of a question if he's the greatest of all time right now. I don't think people are talking about because he's going to get in the Hall of Fame. It's just him versus Jordan. That's the discussion being held right now.
Yeah, I think after his first ring, that was especially the case. I mean, it was no longer a case of is he in the Hall of Fame, but could he chase the GOAT? I think at this point in LeBron James' career, especially with that 4th Finals MVP and that 4th championship, I think it's pretty silly to have him outside of the top 3 players of all time. I think I'll always respect if you want to say Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the greatest player of all time. I'll always respect if someone thinks Jordan is the greatest of all time, but to not even have LeBron James in your top 3 at this point, I think is a bit ignorant.
Yeah, I mean, right after that finals, I've had some aggressive debates with some of my friends about if Jordan or LeBron is better. I mean, personally, I'm a LeBron guy. I think LeBron's the greatest of all time. I'm sure you are as well. But it's just as long as sports exists, the argument between the two is going to always continue. It's never going to end until there's 2 players in the same timeline where they're playing against each other. That's when you kind of can settle the debate. Moving on to number 2, kind of a shocker at number 2 right now. Chris Paul played for the Hornets, played for the Clippers, Rockets, and now he's on the Thunder. I mean, he is a great talent, but I mean, pretty shocking that he's at 2 without winning an MVP compared to some of the other guys on this list.
Yeah, I mean, he's only been to 1 conference championship. And just to kind of preface for everyone listening, I think both me and you, correct me if I'm wrong, lean towards the side of when in doubt, they're not a Hall of Famer. I feel as though if somebody is a Hall of Famer, it should be a very quick yes or a very quick no. And when that kind of player's Hall of Fame eligibility is in doubt, you don't know if he's going to get in or not. He's probably not a Hall of Famer. He's probably just a great player in his selective era. But I feel as though to get into the Hall of Fame, you have to be a great player. And this is where Chris Paul kind of lies in between for me, where it's up in the air for me. I know he's a great statistical point guard, but he just doesn't have the career accolades to kind of warrant himself to be a Hall of Fame caliber player, in my opinion. And I know if you want to compare him to a bunch of other Hall of Famers, he has a better resume than a lot of them, and he has better numbers than a lot of them, and he's had a longer career than a lot of them. But quite frankly, I don't think those players probably deserve to be in the NBA Hall of Fame either. And just a preference, it's not even the NBA Hall of Fame. You have guys from Europe that have never even played in the NBA in the Hall of Fame, which again I think is really weird. They should have a separate Hall of Fame for NBA and just for basketball in general. But that's kind of where I lie on Chris Paul.
I mean, I think Chris Paul, without a doubt, is a Hall of Famer. I mean, looking at his stats right now in Basketball Reference, he's a 9-time All-NBA, 10-time All-Star, 4-time assist champ, 6-time steals champ in the league. I mean, he has the stats, but I just don't think I can say he is 100% a Hall of Famer. I think he's definitely in the maybe lower 90s because if you look at the teams you're on, he kind of made the Hornets a great team. He made the Clippers, obviously he did have help with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, but he made the Clippers a fun team to watch. He kind of transcended the small point guard that wasn't really around in the league, and he became an all-star. Like you can look at players like Muggsy Bogues, maybe they were smaller players, but they weren't great players. This guy, Chris Paul, is short, but he's been an all-star and an all NBA player. So it's just his accolades are there. That's why I can see why he is a Hall of Famer, but 100% is a little too high for me.
Yeah, I completely understand your rationale, and I'm probably definitely too hard on Chris Paul, but I do think it's a hit to your legacy that you've never won a round two series as the best player on your own team. And it's not like this guy has been surrounded by bad players his entire career. He did have some pretty good teammates with Charlotte. I mean, he did have some really good teammates with the Clippers. Blake Griffin, I know he got hurt a couple times, DeAndre Jordan, but they had a good surrounding cast with who presumably is a great coach now. I think he's been exposed a little bit in the past couple of years for really being an underachiever with the Clippers and Doc Rivers. But even getting to Houston, he wasn't the best player on that team, but he sure was a great player. They had a really good surrounding cast. They even had a big man in Clint Capella. So it wasn't so small ball reliant to the point where they had a huge hole in that team. And for them, yes, they did get to that Western Conference Finals, but I still think regardless without Chris Paul or with Chris Paul in that series, I still do think they would have lost. I know a lot of people do not think that, but regardless, Chris Paul being there is not going to make your team shoot better from the 3-point arc. So just a little bit disappointing for Chris Paul's career, in my opinion.
Yeah, he definitely had a lot of misfortunes and missteps during his playoff run, and with the multiple teams he's been on. Moving on to number three, Kevin Durant, 100%. I think Kevin Durant is without a doubt 100%. He's a two times MVP. He's a Finals MVP, NBA championship. He won an MVP. And obviously, he's just one of the best pure scorers in NBA history. Really revolutionized kind of the stretch big. He can just score from anywhere on the court. I think it's without a doubt he's 100%.
Yeah, I mean, he's no doubt 100% a Hall of Famer. He's a great player. I mean, he has 2 rings to his name, and he's one of the most transcendent players of all time. He's probably the most skilled 7-foot big man of all time, the most skilled power forward slash wing of all time, you can even argue. And I think it is a little frustrating to see guys, younger guys coming into the NBA, like LaMelo Ball, like I'm blanking on his name right now, but a top pick as well going into the NBA draft, saying that Kevin Durant is the GOAT. I think people don't realize that at the end of the day, it's not enough to, in most situations, it's not enough to put your head down and be one of the greatest players of all time. You need to be a vocal guy and you need to lift up your teammates. And I've always seen Kevin Durant as an individual great player, not a great team player, not a leader, not a guy who's going to lift the talent around him. I think, again, he's a guy that he's going to put his head down and be the best player on the court in most nights. But at the end of the day, I don't think he can get to the GOAT conversation ever, really, because just of his mindset and how he approaches the game. But Kevin Durant, no doubt Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean that's when you get down to like for the basketball of fame, like just if someone has changed the game. Obviously, like you said, he's not the greatest leader, but he definitely changed the game for having kind of big men be able to shoot as well as he does. So that's why he's just so, I mean, spot on for a Hall of Fame spot. Moving on to number four, kind of a controversial one. 99.9% likely to go into the Hall of Fame, Russell Westbrook. I mean, I'm a huge Russell Westbrook fan, but I don't think he's a 99.9% chance again. I think he should be lower 90s, similar to where I thought Chris Paul should have been. I mean, looking at his stats, obviously he was one MVP, which averaging a triple double. He was, I think, a 9-time All Star, 9-time All NBA. So he has all those accolades, but just like looking at him on the eye test on the court, I mean, he's so turnover prone and he's so careless with the ball. I don't think that he's really just kind of a winning. He doesn't have that winning mentality that a lot of these players on this list have.
Yeah, I mean, we all know the statistic where every single MVP in NBA history has indeed went on to be a Hall of Famer, which I think is great and is very warranted if you look at each individual case. Now, looking at this list, you can notice that that is certainly going to change as Derrick Rose is not in the top 20. He's not even close to 50%, I don't think. I don't think they released this full list, but I would be surprised if Derrick Rose was even hovering around 30, which is very sad. But getting into Russell Westbrook a little, I think he's another guy where, I mean, obviously, according to this, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but I just don't know. Failing to have a pretty solid, okay roster and not getting them to the second round when you're playing teams like rookie Donovan Mitchell, when you're playing very beatable teams, and then later on getting Paul George, getting Carmelo Anthony, who proved to be a very solid playoff contributing player on the Trailblazers this season. Having Steven Adams, having Victor Oladipo at one point, and really dragging your team down in some of those games. Now, don't get me wrong, the Thunder aren't even a playoff team. If you remove him from all those teams, he kind of carried to the playoffs. But even fast forwarding to today, I mean, he was an absolute joke in the Lakers series. He was a big reason why the Rockets lost because he was an absolute liability out there. And everyone thinks every single season, oh, he's changing. He's shooting less threes. He's being more efficient. But once kind of the spotlight is on him, he gets to the playoffs. He kind of just resorts to old Russell Westbrook, which is really sad. And I think it would be really disappointing for Russell Westbrook's career to have him only make the finals once as a very young player. And I think he was the best player on the Thunder in that entire series in 2012. I thought he outplayed James Harden, and I thought he outplayed Kevin Durant, to be quite honest with you. He had that huge game where they won. I think he dropped like 45 points or something like that. But besides that, Russell Westbrook just doesn't have the playoff kind of accolades to get him over the hump to be a no doubt 100%. I mean, he's at 99.9. That might as well be 100% Hall of Famer, which is certainly disappointing.
Yeah, just a player that just revolutionized the game by averaging a triple double in his MVP season. I think he still is hovering around those type of stats the years after he won MVP and maybe still today. But yeah, I don't see him. He doesn't have the winning mentality, like I said, like you said. He should be on this list, but no way should be top five. That I think top five is very exclusive company, and he's not even top five in the NBA right now. Even though there are younger players that are on this list, like Jokic isn't on this list. A little spoiler, but I mean he's not top five for Hall of Famers right now in the NBA, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. I agree. And again, me and Sam's standards are very high. We think you should be a great player in order to make the Hall of Fame. But by the current Hall of Fame standards, I mean, Russell Westbrook's no doubt a Hall of Famer. And most of these guys on a list are a Hall of Famer if you're using their standard. But I think me, Sam, and a lot of other people, a lot of other basketball fans want the NBA or the Basketball Hall of Fame to include much less players to make it much more of an honor to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean you look at someone like Sabonis. I think he played 4 years in the NBA, but he's in the Hall of Fame because of his kind of his European career that he had. He was one of the greatest European players of all time. So maybe we should kind of have an NBA Hall of Fame versus just Basketball Hall of Fame. I think the NFL Hall of Fame, although it is just one sport, I mean, it's just one league for the NFL, I think it's very more just exclusive. And the bust, it's just a great honor to have your bust in the Hall of Fame. And I think for basketball, they're kind of just a lot of people are being let in.
Yeah, no, and I mean, year by year, we see so many guys who, if they had a comparable NBA career as they did in the NFL, they would be no doubt basketball Hall of Famers. But you have some really great players that missed out of the NFL Hall of Fame every single year. Guys like Kurt Warner, I mean, he won an MVP. He had great seasons. He brought his team to what, 3 Super Bowls. A guy like him would be a no doubt Hall of Famer in the Basketball Hall of Fame. And I don't even think he came that close to in terms of getting votes to be a first ballot Hall of Famer in the NFL. And I kind of like that, even though a guy like Kurt Warner, a lot of other guys are great players that miss out, but I do like that kind of exclusivity.
And someone like, to go along with your boy, someone like Kent Stabler, I mean, he was one of the greatest quarterbacks in the 70s. I think he was just let into the Hall of Fame maybe 4 years ago after he died. So someone who was so great during his career, and he was let in like 50 years after he played. So it just shows how much more competitive the NFL Hall of Fame is. Moving on to number 5, we have Westbrook's teammate right now, former teammate in the Thunder and teammate now with James Harden at a 99.9%. I think looking at Harden, I think he's in a similar boat with Russell Westbrook. Obviously, he won MVP. He has the All NBA stats, All Stars awards, but just kind of just I don't think he's really done anything that special. He hasn't been in that besides his time with the Thunder. He hasn't been in the finals since. I mean, constantly being beat by the Warriors in the playoffs. I mean, obviously he's revolutionized the game. That's probably why he's so high on this list because he is one, along with Kevin Durant, one of the best pure scorers in NBA history.
Yeah, no, I think he is a no doubt Hall of Famer in my opinion. Now, that's not to say his career has been disappointing because, in my opinion, it's been very disappointing. Again, I mean, the Lakers had a historically great defense, specifically a historically great defense against perimeter players, against guards. I mean, I don't remember the last time I saw a team defend Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, lock them down. Russell Westbrook, James Harden locked them down. Jamal Murray locked them down for the most part, and then really played great defense against some of those perimeter guards on the Heat, an exception to Jimmy Butler's one great game in the finals. Despite that, though, I mean, James Harden just losing his team games along with Russell Westbrook, he just couldn't get it going. And the thing with James Harden that's always frustrated me is that it feels like if you just slap a double team on him and really pick him up at half court, he just doesn't try all game. I mean, he had games shooting 9 shots, 8 shots, 12 shots in do or die games in the playoffs. And you just can't have that. You need your best player to be aggressive, and you need your best player to move off ball. I mean, James Harden, he has a double team on him, and he just stands in the top of the key the entire game. When if you threw a couple off ball screens at him, if you had him run around the perimeter, I mean, he would have been an absolute problem for the Lakers, and that series would have been majorly more interesting. But James Harden, kind of the unwillingness to do that, it seems throughout his entire NBA career, and kind of the lack of assertiveness he's had in the playoffs has really plagued him. And I think that's what kind of makes him stand out compared to guys like Dwayne Wade, who is considered the third best shooting guard of all time. If he wants to get into that conversation, he has to be the best player on a championship team like Dwayne Wade was, like Allen Iverson was, as he led his team to the NBA Finals as the greatest player on his team, one of the best players in the league. So I think James Harden needs to do that if he wants to climb in the ranks of greatest shooting guards of all time. But in my opinion, I mean, a guy who has deserved multiple MVPs, in my opinion, and has only gotten one, I think he is a no doubt Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I think he is a Hall of Famer, maybe just a tiny, tiny bit lower on this list. I mean, he does lack that effort all the time on defense. He only kind of turns it up on defense when he needs to, which is a problem. Kind of like someone as a Yankee fan, Robinson Cano would kind of just always hit home runs and just trot down the first baseline when he grounded out and stuff like that. I would like to see a player give effort all the time. I know it's just extremely physical demanding, but as a, like you said, a number one guy in a team, he needs to give effort all the time. But moving on to number 6, we have Steph Curry at 99.8. I think Steph Curry should be in the 2 spot, really. I think he should be 100%. I mean, 2-time MVP, back-to-back MVP, one of the only unanimous MVP, am I not mistaken? 3-time final or NBA championship. I mean, come on, Steph needs to be higher. If we're talking about players that revolutionize the game, Steph is the guy that the sole provider for the NBA shooting so many threes right now.
I mean, he shaped the game of basketball more than LeBron James has. I mean, you can argue he shaped the game of basketball just from a pure on the court standpoint than any player of all time in NBA history. So, and I don't think that's an argument for his legacy in terms of kind of on the court basketball, but in terms of kind of the impact of the game, I mean, he's up there at number 1 of all time in the history of basketball players, just in terms of how the game is played. That's how great he is, and that's how revolutionary he's been, in my opinion. And again, he's a guy who has his career been a little bit disappointing with no finals MVPs, with kind of not playing so great in some playoff situations, in some, I mean, NBA finals situations, sure, but to not have him at 100%, not only that, but to have him lower than Russell Westbrook and James Harden. I mean, I would love to think right now, what is one thing those two players have above Steph Curry? Not MVPs, not career accolades, not career total stats, not finals appearances, not final championships, not finals appearances. I don't understand why Russell Westbrook and James Harden, for years now, I remember ever since 2017 seeing not only Basketball Reference rank these two guys ahead of Steph Curry, but even ESPN does it. And I simply don't understand why not only he's not at 100%, but why he's lower than those two players. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, he deserves his, like you said, fair share of hate, but Just yeah, he's above those guys. He's beat those guys in the playoffs multiple times. Just I don't know. He's just the best 3-point shooter in NBA history compared to someone like Ray Allen, who a lot of people thought was or is better than him. I mean, his historic dominance in the playoffs, despite some. I mean, you can bring up the final shot against the Raptors or kind of the game 6 against the Raptors where he's a little iffy, but his dominance throughout the NBA for such a short amount of time is just second to none. Maybe LeBron James, you can put him in that category, but Steph Curry needs to be at 100%. I don't understand why the Pro Basketball Reference is slandering his name.
And I mean, I'm not the most pro Curry guy of all time. I do think he has his faults, and I do still question the effect that just a smaller bodied point guard who's not that great at the other end can have on could have that great of an effect on a championship team. And clearly Steph Curry has proven that he can have that effect, but he has been limited in some kind of do or die situations in terms of his legacy to be kind of that greatest point guard of all time. If he wants to reach Magic, I don't even know if he can at this point, just because Magic has what 4 or 5 Finals MVPs, and he's had what 5 championships. So I'm not even sure if he can get there at this point in his career. But I mean, he's going to have the 3-point record for a very long time, in my opinion. And Steph Curry is just an absolute phenomenal player, and he still does have 3 championships to his name. You have to respect that. He had as many championships as LeBron for a couple of years there. So Steph Curry, he's going to be great in the 2020s, and he's certainly going to prove that he's at 100%, maybe even next season.
Yeah, we know the Warriors are going to be a playoff or an NBA championship caliber team like next year when he's healthy, when Clay's back. So the Warriors are still a scary team, regardless of what people say about Steph Curry. But going to number 7, Dwight Howard at 99.4%. I'm actually surprised he's this high. I thought he would kind of be on the cusp of this list. So if you look at his accolades, I think he's a 3-time defensive player, led the Magic to the NBA Finals, not Finals champion with the Lakers. We're talking about revolutionized basketball. I think he's the last player to come right out of high school and be, I mean, that dominant. He's an athletic freak when he was with the Magic. I think he is just like a great player, but being a little high on this list is kind of why I'm a little sketchy with this list, because there's so many great players at the bottom and he's so high.
Yeah, I'm really wondering how much this championship run this season with the Lakers kind of had an effect on this. Was he at 50%, then he jumped to 98%? Because I think that would be ridiculous. He didn't have that great of a season, that great of effect on this championship roster. I mean, or was he already at 90% and that gave him an extra 8% kind of boost? I'm not really sure with that. But getting into Dwight Howard, for an example, I think he's one of the best examples of is a guy a Hall of Famer or not, because he had a great career, and for kind of a 3 to 4 year stretch with the Magic, I mean, he was one of the best players in the league. Going back and watching his old highlights, it's really surprising how much shorter he is than the average center back in the day. I know when the NBA kind of redid their heights, and it was like Dwight Howard's like 6'9", 6'10", and I was really surprised. I went back and watched his just tape, and it just did not look like that, just because he can jump out the roof. He's such an athletic freak, like you said, and he is a player that in his prime you could surround him with a bunch of shooters and he could be the best player on a championship team. If he wasn't playing Kobe in the Lakers, if he was playing a couple other of the teams that went to the finals in the 2000 era, I mean, he's winning a finals ring as the best player on his team, which I think that's absolutely huge. But just a really short prime and not that many accolades in career to kind of justify himself to be a no doubt Hall of Famer, in my opinion. But I do think he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I mean, if his career was kind of that short stint with the Magic, I think no doubt he would have been a Hall of Famer. But there were so many down years with him that it's kind of just hurt his legacy a lot. I don't know why I don't know what happened with him physically, that he just fell off a cliff. But yeah, I think this like you said, this championship really helped him a lot. I mean, there are great players on this Lakers team. I mean, obviously LeBron and AD kind of carried them, but he was kind of like, I would say, top 5 best player on that Lakers team this year for this championship. So he was kind of a key contributor. Not saying a lot because he did not. Some of the company on that team wasn't the greatest, but I mean, yeah, he is a Hall of Famer. But 99.4 is kind of a lot.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. And he was a situational player for the Lakers in some series, including or such as the Nuggets. He played a lot of minutes. He even started in playing garbage time in game 6. And I know he hit that like near half court shot to cap off the championship run with which was a really nice cherry on top, but he didn't really play in that series. And there was other series where he really didn't even touch the court. I think in the Rockets series he barely even played too. I think he only logged in a couple of minutes. And I think that was kind of the story with him some seasons or some games in this season where he would either play and have a great effect on the game or he would just ride the bench all game just because of kind of the scheme fit and the fit of centers in today's NBA. And I think that is what led to his downfall more than anything else is that the style of his play kind of really went out of favor in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, he can't really shoot, and I mean that just shooting bigs is just a phenomenon in the NBA right now. He just can't. He couldn't keep up. But going to number 8, we have Carmelo Anthony at 98.2. I mean, Carmelo is top 20 in NBA points on the all-time list. I mean, he's a All NBA. He's a scoring champ. He's never won a finals. He never won a championship. He hasn't been an MVP. I don't know why he's this high on the list. I mean, if you can, I guess it is the Basketball Hall of Fame, so you couldn't bring in the gold medals, which he has the most out of any other um, American basketball player. So I guess that can give him a boost, but I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know why he's at 8 on this list.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is the Olympic gold medals. And Carmelo Anthony and Olympic medal is real. I mean, he was one of the best, if not the best player on some of those Team USA gold medal winning teams, playing as a stretch four, really adopting his game to the European style quite nicely every single 4 years for a couple stretches there with Team USA. And I definitely do think that put him over the top. But terms of his NBA career, I mean, yeah, again, he's an underachiever. And I think he's a guy where, looking back on his career, I think his career has aged pretty badly, if anything, rather than aging really good. Because getting into the age of analytics, we're kind of learning that isolation ball and especially isolation ball on 2 point mid range shots are the least efficient shot that you can get on the NBA court. And kind of looking back at his career, I think that's definitely evident because again, he was not able to get his team to very great heights ever in his career. And at this point, I know he's just a role player. And I think he will stick around in the league for a couple more years just because of how well he did end up playing with the Trailblazers. But for your best defensive season to come this year in 2020 when you were drafted in 2003, that's obviously a bit disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at those Knick teams, he was the best player on those teams. That could be kind of contribute to his percentage because they did make the playoffs a couple years. They did win. I think they were at most like a 3 seed at one point. So he did contribute to that. But yeah, like you said, with his defensive ability, I know that just shows that the lack of effort that he had early on in his career. He didn't really care. I mean, if you look at Carmelo, he's not in the best shape kind of back in the day. So there are that lack of like, I need to try in the offseason. I need to get into the best shape. I think he's kind of been in the best shape this season as his whole career because he did kind of get the name of skinny Mello, but I don't know why he kind of lacked the effort so long when he was in his prime.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy where if he had LeBron James killer mindset and LeBron James kind of work regimen and his effort, especially in the offseason, I mean, we're talking about Carmelo Anthony as being a top 15, top 20 player of all time. I think he's that talented and he was that pure of a scorer, but him not bringing it kind of not only on the defensive end, but his willingness to kind of adopt his game to winning basketball, getting his teammates more involved. I certainly do think that hurt him at the end of the day. And I think he himself will look back on his NBA career and said, I could have definitely been a greater player and kind of reach greater heights.
Yep. Moving on to number 9 on this list, we have Pau Gasol at 93.4%. I mean, someone who kind of should have retired a little while ago. He's pretty old, but looking
Yeah.
at his stats, he's a two-time NBA champ, six-time All-Star, four-time All-NBA candidate, and one-time All-Rookie his rookie season in 2001. I mean, since it is the Basketball Hall of Fame, he is one of the greatest European players of all time. That probably gives him a major boost. I mean, those NBA championships that he won with Kobe, he was kind of the second best player on those teams. So being the second best player on a championship team is a major boost too. So no question that he is a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's 93.4 if you kind of take out the European aspect of his career, but if you kind of add the dominance that Spain did in so many of those Olympic games, that definitely gives him that boost.
Yeah, he's a no doubt Hall of Famer in my opinion. I mean, and he showed, unlike a lot of kind of second fiddle or third fiddle players in NBA history to championship teams, he proved that without Kobe, he's still a phenomenal, phenomenal player. I mean, on some of those Grizzlies teams, he was great. And obviously for Team Spain, he was just an absolutely phenomenal player. And he proved to even be better than his brother Mark in most seasons when they did play together. And Mark is an absolutely phenomenal player as well. But Pal, I mean, again, Kobe's not winning those championships without Pal, and being the second best player on a championship team will definitely get you to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, moving on to number 10, we have Anthony Davis. So newly added to his resume, NBA champion. I mean, he's one of the most dominant players in the NBA right now. I think by the end of his career, he will be 100%. I just think right now he's so young that he has to be at 91.4. But no question that he is a Hall of Famer. Just looking at his resume right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, it's really just amazing that his legacy, in my opinion, hasn't even started yet. His career kind of just started this season just because now he's finally able to compete for championships. And I mean, he's already at what, 91%, which is absolutely incredible. He did have great years with the Pelicans, but now being arguably in a lot of games the best player on the court for your championship team. I mean, yes, he's a no doubt Hall of Famer, but I'm just really curious to see not only where the trajectory of his career goes. Is he only going to win one or two more championships, or is he going to win multiple, and is he going to be the best player on those teams? Also, where is he going to end up? Because I don't think he ends up playing in LA as long as people expect. I do expect him to sign a 2 or 3 year contract with LA and then potentially move elsewhere after LeBron James leaves.
Yeah, like, he's definitely going to try to ride this LeBron coattail. Just obviously, LeBron has so much dominance in the playoffs and the finals. But yeah, what's going to happen to him after he leaves? Is he going to be able to kind of corral that success that he did have with LeBron and kind of help him move his career forward with him when he's leading his team alone? I mean, obviously, when he was with the Pelicans, they weren't the best teams. When he had his best success with the Pelicans, he had a player like Rondo that can be his second fiddle to help him win a series and kind of go at the Warriors a little bit. But yeah, Anthony Davis, he's definitely a Hall of Famer moving forward if he kind of is able to get more awards and accolades. But if he's someone like kind of Dwight Howard just falls off a cliff after this season or in 2 more years, I mean, then his Hall of Fame is kind of in question.
Yeah, certainly. And kind of skimming forward a little bit here with Kyle Lowry, I mean, that championship is going to go down as one of the most memorable, in my opinion, one of the most impactful for a specific franchise in NBA history. Kevin Love, again, he did win that huge championship with LeBron, and I definitely think his Timberwolves days really helped him out. But kind of looking at Damian Lillard and Paul George, I think it's very weird that they are above Kyrie Irving. I know that they probably have higher point totals in their career than Kyrie Irving, but at the same time, Kyrie Irving, I mean, LeBron James does not have a ring with Cleveland, a franchise he was with for the majority of his career without Kyrie. He took more shots per game than LeBron James in the majority of the seasons they played together. And he's just a phenomenal, phenomenal player. And he's a guy certainly that his legacy is yet to be written.
Yeah, obviously the early part of his career has been injury riddled. He has some problems with Cleveland, wanting to kind of be his own player on his own team, and then he had the opportunity with the Celtics and he kind of just dropped the ball and he was injured a lot and he just sat out a lot of games. So I mean, kind of his being a hothead kind of hurt him a little bit on this list, but I don't know what he should be definitely be above someone like Damian Lillard and Paul George. Paul George too is terrible in the playoffs as of recently. I mean, he obviously is great in the regular season, but he hasn't really proved it when it matters most. Damian Lillard, on the other hand, has certainly proved it when it matters most. He's one of the best modern playoff performers we've seen as of recently, but I think Kyrie should be above Paul George and maybe slightly above Damian Lillard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and all these guys I don't think should be above 50% though. I think all of these guys are leaning towards no rather than leaning towards yes. And I feel like if you're 50% above, it's leaning towards yes, but these guys are still pretty young players in terms of their legacy. I think all of them are hovering around 30 years of age, but again, their legacy is yet to be written. I think as of right now, trajecting forward for Paul George, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. Damian Lillard, again, a revolutionary player, but I don't know if he's going to have the accolades, especially if he stays in Portland. I don't know if he's going to have the accolades to be a great, great player. I think Kyrie Irving, too. I mean, now Kevin Durant, a guy who's at 100%, is his teammate. And if he fails to get to a championship, that's definitely going to take a hit on his legacy.
Yeah, quickly before we go on to the rest of the list, I just want to talk about Kyle Lowry shortly. I mean, in my opinion, I don't know about you, I think he's the greatest Raptor of all time. I mean, he's been on that team through thick and thin, and they traded DeMar DeRozan to get Kawhi Leonard, and Kyle Lowry. Just a lot of people just kind of said he can't play big in the playoffs. He always chokes, but when he had Kawhi, I mean, he played great in those series. I think he's rightfully so at 85% in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, he's a phenomenal, phenomenal player. And I think that was definitely highlighted, not only obviously in 2019 when they won the championship, but this year in the playoffs. I mean, his defense is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's the best defense I've personally ever seen by somebody who's about 6 feet tall, who still even averages, 18 points per game. I mean, he's certainly, again, he proved this playoff run. He's not the best player on a championship team, but he certainly could be the second best, third best player on a championship team. I want him to get traded to a really good contending team. Even though Toronto is that, I think he would be suited better alongside two offensive minded players rather than just this kind of team oriented style of basketball, because I don't think he's that guy who can get you 25 to 30 points on any given night. I think he is more that guy who scores a consistent 18, a consistent 20 points per game, but still, I mean, Kyle Lowry is an absolutely phenomenal player. And getting onto your point about the greatest Raptor of all time, I'm sure some, maybe even newer Raptors fans would argue Vince Carter, but I think a lot of people forget that Vince Carter had a very sour ending with the Raptors. A lot of old head um, Raptors fans don't like Vince Carter. Then maybe you'll get into a guy like DeMar DeRozan, who I think a lot of still Raptors fans think is the greatest Raptor of all time. But he didn't have the legacy that Kyle Lowry has with that franchise. And then Kawhi Leonard, I mean, he only played one season. I think he certainly could have been the best Raptor of all time if he played there 6, 7 years. But Kyle Lowry, I think, is no doubt the greatest Raptor of all time.
Yeah, but let's moving on to the kind of the last five names. I'm just gonna rattle them off, and then we can kind of talk about them. So 16, we have Blake Griffin at 55, 54.8. 17, we have Kawhi Leonard at 54.4. 18, we have Klay Thompson at 51.3. 19, we have LaMarcus Aldridge at 50.1, and then 20, we have Jimmy Butler at 42.5. Looking at those last couple players, I think it's shocking that Kawhi Leonard is only at 54.4. I think he should be kind of top 10. I mean, he's won 2 Finals MVPs. He's a Finals MVP, Finals or NBA championship multiple times. I mean, he is on the list of greatest players in the NBA right now. He's that dominant, great offensive player, great defensive player. I don't know why he's hovering at seven on this list, or 17 on this list. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute joke that Blake Griffin is anywhere near him, nonetheless higher than him. I don't understand why Blake Griffin would even be anywhere close to 50%. Anywhere close. I mean, he's been injured throughout his entire career. He's proven to be a great player, don't get me wrong, but he's just been injured every single playoff run he's ever been in, or he's choked in every single playoff run he's ever been in. And I mean, with the Pistons, I know he's going to end up with another franchise pretty soon, I'm sure. But Blake Griffin, I mean, he's just not a Hall of Fame caliber player. I think he's a player where even to huge, great basketball fans, in 30 years, I think Blake Griffin is going to be a very forgettable name, sadly, in NBA history. I think he is going to be lost in NBA history as just another really great player who kind of didn't play up to his potential. But again, Kawhi Leonard, I understand why he is lower, but not this low. He didn't have kind of the stats on the Spurs until what 2014, 2015. Gets injured, plays great with the Raptors, of course, wins that championship, and then played great this season with the Clippers. But he's a guy, I think, again, his legacy is yet to be written. And then Klay Thompson, I think Klay Thompson is going to be a no doubt Hall of Famer by the end of his career. I think he will have the stats. I think he'll be the second greatest shooter of all time, not to mention 3 rings as the second or third best player on your team. And then kind of going into LaMarcus Aldridge a little bit. Great player. I think he's another player who's going to be lost in NBA history. And then Jimmy Butler. I think his position at 42% is fair because he really didn't have a legacy until this Miami season. And he is an older player, and he was a defensive-minded player the majority of his career. Had the offensive stats to get into the Hall of Fame, and I don't think he really ever will, sadly, because I mean he was a liability on offense for a large part of his career with the Bulls, sadly.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Butler, as his career goes on, as the Heat kind of, if they're able to kind of stay at this level of skill and become a powerhouse in the East, Jimmy Butler will rise onto this list. I think someone like Blake Griffin, like you were just talking about, I think he's similar to LaMarcus Aldridge, how kind of just LaMarcus Aldridge is an older player in the twilight of his career, how he is kind of at 50%. I think by the end of Blake Griffin's career, he will kind of go down a little bit because obviously from when he started in the NBA till now, he did revolutionize his game by being just a dunker, and now he can kind of shoot a little more, so he has kind of grown as a player, but I don't know why he's at 54%. I think he will lower eventually as his career goes on. But looking at the NBA right now, are there any players that you think should be on the top 20 that are not?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that same exact question. Off the top of my head, not really, no. It's just kind of the positioning of some players on this list. Now, you can definitely talk about if some players are going to appear on this list pretty soon. I think there's a number of guys you can kind of mention there, but in terms of kind of players that should be on this list right now, off the top of my head, I cannot think of any. Can you?
No, I can't really, but someone on the Lakers that just won NBA championship. If someone like Rajon Rondo, who is older, he has won 2 NBA championships. Would you think he or contribute him to be in the Hall of Fame?
I think he is very underrated in his Boston days. I think people really underestimate. And again, I did bring this point up to you very early on in the infant stages of this channel where I don't think that big three wins a championship unless they luck into a late round, first round pick being an all-star level player. And I think Rajon Rondo has definitely been a great player throughout his career, but again, I mean, I don't think he has the accolades to kind of warrant himself to be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, just throughout his whole career, just a very underrated player. I mean, looking at someone that we talked about at number 10, Anthony Davis winning a series early in his career, there's no chance he wins that series without Rondo dishing him the ball. And looking at a series, kind of a forgotten series, I think it was 1 versus 8. The Celtics were the 1 seed, the Bulls were the 8 seed, and they were going to win that series. And then Rondo got hurt, and then the Bulls just completely collapsed. I think playoff Rondo is a serious thing. When Rondo gets in the playoffs, he's dominant, and people can't stop him. I mean, looking at this Lakers team, he was the third best player on this championship roster, in my opinion.
No, yeah, he really was. And looking at one player, kind of projecting if he's going to be a Hall of Famer, I think maybe this is the last guy we can talk about here before we end this video. But it's Giannis Antetokounmpo, and is he going to be able to go to a team or have a team in Milwaukee that allows him to start building his legacy? Because again, like I shared that stat at the beginning of the video, every MVP has been a Hall of Famer so far. And looking at his career and just looking at his skill set, it's hard for me to picture Giannis Antetokounmpo hoisting multiple NBA championships as the number one best player on his team, it's just difficult for me to do right now. He's a transcendent talent. He's a great player, but just because of his play style and his kind of inability to shoot the basketball really at a high level, I'm just kind of questioning him and his legacy moving forward.
I mean, obviously, like we talked about Blake, or I just talked about Blake Griffin, how he kind of changed his game, but by being just a dunking player to now being able to shoot. We've seen Giannis make major strides in being a better shooter on the perimeter. Obviously, he still is in the infancy of his career. I think, what is he, only 23, 24 years old? But without a doubt, he's the best player, one of the best players in the NBA right now. He's only 23 and he has 2 MVPs to his name. So I think if a team like the Warriors or the Raptors or the Heat, I saw some reports saying they're going to go after him. If he's able to go to one of those teams and finally be able to win an NBA championship, without a question, he's a Hall of Famer. I just think he needs a ring to his name.
Yeah, definitely. And he's a guy, I mean, he's averaging near 29, 28 points per game this early on to his career with 30 minutes a game. I mean, if he continues for another 15 years, averaging over 25 points per game, which I honestly think is possible. I mean, we're getting into top 10 scorers of all time in terms of pure stats, which is just absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, to be that young, to be that dominant already, and that kind of just on so many just leaderboards of stats. I mean, it's insane considering that he was such a raw talent coming into the league out of Greece. Well, thank everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed this look at the top 20 potential Hall of Famers, and we'll see you in the next one.